With our guest, Sarah Stern is the founder and president of the Endowment for Middle East Truth. Sarah has been defending the nation of Israel for a number of years. She's testified before Congress. She's written countless articles in the Jerusalem Post and Front Page Mag, The American Thinker, Breitbart. She's the editor and author of a book called Saudi Arabia and the Global Islamist Terrorist Network, America and the West's Fatal Embrace. And I could go on, but I want to talk to Sarah. Good morning, Sarah. Are you here in the States or are you in Israel?
I'm right here in the States. Thank you so much for having me, Sandy.
My pleasure, Sarah. I know this is a tough time. What is your personal connection with the nation of Israel?
Well, my personal connection is extraordinarily deep. My daughter, who is right now pregnant with our first grandchild, just emerged from her safe room, which is a room that is supposed to be designated in every Israeli family's home. Her husband is an American who served in the Israeli Defense Forces for 5 years and is in the reserves, and they are waiting on pins and needles for him to be called up.
You know, Sarah, with the visits that I've made to Israel and the friends that I have there, I met in the course of interviewing a year ago last November when I was with the Israeli Defense Forces, a lot of young American Jews who have immigrated to Israel and have joined the military and heard story after story about how it changed their life, how they sort of got purpose, how they grew up. And so when we hear that, I think it was yesterday, that 7 Israeli defense soldiers were killed and 2 of them were American, that's the reason. A lot of American Jewish young people are actually going over there to fight.
That's right. The truth is that personally, I have a very interesting story. I am named for my aunt who, on September 1st, 1939, was living in a little community in Poland, Borschtów, Poland, and the Nazis marched in. She had twin daughters, one of whom is named Rachel, which is my daughter's name, who's living in Israel now. They ripped the daughters from out of her arms. She was asked to strip down naked, and they proceeded to mow her down together with everybody else in that little community. Before that, they were asked to dig a hole. So we carry this legacy with us. We've understood why it is so necessary to have a strong, proud Jewish state and a strong, proud army. And my son-in-law, who's American, has absolutely no hesitation if he's called into Gaza to serve. He feels that this is the only way that there will ever be a Jewish state. If Israel were to put down its arms today, there would be no Israel. If the Palestinians and the Arabs were to put down its arms today, there'd be peace.
Sarah, I don't try to hide my sympathies. I am a complete supporter of Israel, certainly in this conflict. It's not that I agree with everything the Israeli government ever does on anything, but on these conflicts, I am absolutely in total support. And in reading what's going on around the world, Sarah, I know you've been following the headlines. I am shocked at what's going on in Spain, in Madrid, what's going on in London, what's going on, even in Chicago, my home city. They found tons of hate literature against Jews in various numbers of cars. I don't know much more about the story than that, but it is just an epidemic. And then, so the world is being told that Israel now is killing all these civilians, and we all know that Hamas likes that. That feeds into their propaganda machine. At the same time, we just heard yesterday from news reports that our government is sending, I think, $35 million to Hamas into the Gaza Strip? How can Israel sustain its attack, its defensive attack on Gaza when the Americans are sending all their aid to help Gaza? I don't understand that.
I am baffled. I do think, as the scholar Elliot Cohn once said, the Holocaust bought us 50 years without anti-Semitism, but now all the anti-Semites are crawling out of the woodwork. And we're seeing this anti-Israel sentiment, the strong, vicious, vitriolic sentiment, is just thinly veiled anti-Semitism. In Paris, just the other day, there was a memorial for the the 3 slain, kidnapped high school students. And there was such a vicious anti-Semitic riot where they were saying death to the Jews, Jews back into the ovens. The Jews that were at the memorial service in a synagogue were afraid to leave, and some of them actually got beaten up as they left the synagogue. It is a very, very ugly phenomenon that we are watching, and this total disproportionate type of standard that they're using to hold Israel to is a symptom of that. I mean, if we had rockets going into our homes in Washington and Chicago and Los Angeles and New York every 5 to 10 minutes, believe me, we would do our best to ensure the safety and security of our people, and we would not act with the incredible, amazing amount of restraint that the Israeli government has been acting with.
You know, Sarah, that's not something you had to repeat to this audience or certainly to me. I mean, that is a big, major duh with a capital D. But here's the thing. Our president continues this message. And Josh Earnest yesterday, his spokesman, repeated it. We support Israel's right to defend themselves against the multiple bombings of Hamas into the Israeli territory. We support their right to defend themselves, but we want to cease fire. And we want to send aid to their enemies, to the people they're fighting. No aid to Israel, just aid to Hamas. Sarah, at this point, surely Netanyahu and the leaders of Israel and the people who live in Israel have figured out that this administration is no friend to Israel.
Right. This, I'm sure, deep down inside, they know this. I know that Ron Dermer, and who is our ambassador from Israel to the United States, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, have also been incredibly restrained in their language towards this administration, but it has been extremely difficult, extremely harsh on Israel from day one. At the very beginning of the Obama administration, President Obama met with leaders of several Jewish organizations and said to them, you know, there's never been daylight before between the United States and Israel, and look what it's gotten us. You know, we feel that's part of the reason that we are so hated in the Muslim and Arab part of the world. Let's try a different tact. And unfortunately, these Jews were the Jews of silence. They lost their tongues. And unfortunately, when there is daylight between the state of Israel and the United States, that's when all of our enemies and the enemies of Western civilization and freedom-loving people everywhere come out of the woodwork. Nature abhors a vacuum, and they feel empowered to attack.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, we only have a minute left, believe it, unbelievably. And this is a tough question I want to ask you. You know that I'm a Christian, and we share a God, but we don't share Jesus. But I want to ask you, are people in Israel, are they looking to God in any way? Do you see them getting bitter, angry at God? Or is this driving them to consider the promises of the Old Testament? What does this do to them spiritually?
That is a tough question. Israel is a very divided nation. There are so many different factions and so many individual answers, as multiple as there are individuals. Some of them are getting deeply spiritual. Some of them are praying constantly, like my daughter. Others, who have never looked to God before, are still not looking to God. So it's very difficult for me to really answer that. But there are many, many people who feel that the existence and the creation of the state of Israel was a miracle, and that they have witnessed the miracles in our lifetime. You know, the 67 war was a miracle. The 73 war was a miracle. The fact that Israel is alive today with 170,000 missiles surrounding it from every direction is a continuous miracle.
It is a miracle, and it is proof to me of the prophecies in the Old Testament. It really is. I just don't see how a little country like this could have ever found its way into the modern world and survived what it survived. And so we stand by and watch what God's going to do, Sarah, and millions of us are praying for Israel. I know that you know that. By the way, Emet means truth in Hebrew, and that's the name of Sarah's organization, Sarah Stern with Emet. Sarah, thank you so much for making time, and we will be praying for you and your family.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Thank you, and shalom. All right, well, Sandy Rios on a Tuesday morning, it's never dull, is it? Sandy Rios in the morning on AFR Talk.